Okay, so this is it's now week 7, which means that last week was week 6, and we covered corporate strategy. So the key thing regards the corporate strategy as opposed to business strategy is that when we think about many organisations, medium-sized organisations, small organisations, they're typically competing as a unit. They're a business. They have competitors. They have suppliers. They have buyers, and therefore we can look at the industry structure for a business, and we can conduct and produce a strategy which seems to meet the expectations and needs of that industry. Or equally, we can use our resources and our capabilities so that we can create new products that fit into the same industry, or even new products and services that might fit into a different industry. Okay, so those are the two different approaches when we think about business strategy. And that is because we are competing, and that's so when we talk about business strategy, it's the how we compete, and that's okay if you're a sort of small to medium-sized company. But if you're a large company, then actually we're talking about multiple companies, almost like having multiple products. That actually we can decide where do they compete, and this is really important. So corporate strategy considers where are we competing. Business strategy is how we compete. So where do we compete if we're Tesco, for example? We're a large supermarket, there are other large supermarkets available. What can we do then to improve our business, grow our business, to give a return on the investment that our shareholders have made? And generally speaking, it's very difficult to grow your business by doing the same business. You might be able to improve your business in some way and do your business better and do it more cost effectively, but actually that's rarely ever a way of significant growth. It might be what you might call incremental growth. So we're thinking then about a corporation like Tesco. What could they do? Well, one thing that they could do, and one thing that they did do, is they chose not to compete directly with other supermarkets. So they moved out of groceries, in the sense that they continued to do groceries, but then they started to think about electrical goods, mobile phones, holidays, credit cards, etc., etc. So they started to compete in different marketplaces in which their normal competitors didn't compete. Now, why would that be a benefit? Well, the key reason is this: everybody that buys groceries buys other things. So if you can find out enough about everybody that buys groceries, and that's the entire world population, isn't it? If you can find out enough about everybody that buys food and drinks and groceries, then actually you can also maybe find out, well, when do they buy a fridge or a freezer or a television or a mobile phone? If you start to learn something about their behaviour, you can then start to anticipate and to predict their behaviour in a way that Tesco did. So they introduced their club card as a way of gathering information about customers' grocery behaviour. But because they understood their grocery behaviours, they also understood that their life was changing and that they had a separate set of businesses which were not in the same industry. They were competing against different companies, but actually the advantage that the data collection that was generated from the grocery business produced resulted in them being able to forecast and anticipate changing demands of their normal customers. I'll give you a simple example. You go into Tesco's, you've been buying, meals for single people, microwave meals, and you've been doing this for, the last 18 years. And then one day you start buying roses and chocolates, and then you start buying meals for two. Well, that probably means that your life is about to change and romance has come into your life and you may be getting married. And at which point, of course, you need a new hi-fi system, you might need a better phone, you want to change your status in terms of sorts of clothes that you wear. So as a consequence of people's buying behaviour changing, we can realise that often that their life is changing. So when families go into the shops and start buying baby products, we know that they've started a family. And then we know that for the next 18 years plus, their family will follow a certain process. That the children need certain types of products, and they go to school, they need different types of products, and then they become teenagers and they need different products. In fact, what Tesco can do is they can actually map people's lives for the next 20, 30, 40 years just by looking at the basket of things that are being purchased. So Tesco is a great example of a business which in fact became a corporation, and it has a corporate strategy that says, how can we use the various strengths that we've got to enter different industries which may or may not be connected, but we can use the strengths that we have, particularly from our grocery business, to grow our businesses in other parts of the world, in other parts, in other types of sectors. So that's what they did. They had a product level strategy, they have a business level strategy, and a corporate level strategy. And as a consequence of those three things, they were able to essentially maximize the advantage that they were giving to customers, their own competitive advantage, and to charge money for that. So hopefully we can just continue, a bit of an interruption. So that's the difference between the business and corporate level. Remember that business is how do we do it, corporate level is where do we do it. So there are similarities between that and managing a portfolio of products or services in the way that a brand manager or a product manager might do. Okay, so thinking about then how does a company establish advantages? Essentially, it comes down to, as a large company, do we have a range of products that can be applied to different industries? Because if we do, then corporate strategy simply applies. We're looking at different industries, and therefore we're talking about where can we compete. When we think about the supply chain itself, we have a choice. As a big company, we could actually buy up our supply chain. Those are our buyers or our distributors, and therefore take control of those. And that's therefore different industries. We're moving into the industry of distribution, for example, or we're moving into the industry of mining, or farming. So the industries are different, but actually they work together. And one of the opportunities for corporations is to look at how can we enter different industries, but as a consequence, generate a greater value or income. Clearly, where these are related industries, like your supply chain, the benefits that you get from that is that you can reduce the costs of purchasing. Effectively, the cost of doing business between a supplier and a buyer becomes absorbed into the parent company, and the parent company then benefits by reducing its costs by that amount and increasing its value, of course, because now it can control what is and isn't being provided and the quality at which it's being provided. So that is important. So, and then of course, I guess the other thing that corporations can do is they can decide where they compete in terms of geography. So for some companies, they are global brands. They are more or less the same everywhere in the world. And this, in the case of generic products, food and drink, this is not unusual. Coca-Cola is one example. Although the reality is that even in that situation, you may have to modify your tastes or some of the ingredients for particular localities. So essentially, the where can we compete, corporate decision, also includes the national location too. Okay, so given the fact that large corporations actually are complex, a further aspect of corporate strategy is how can we organise ourselves in such a way that we deliver value to the customer in a way that doesn't result in us becoming extremely efficient at what we do, but incredibly ineffective at what we do. So this concept of the Icarus paradox. If you become absolutely fantastic at what you do, that's all right whilst the market exists. You're the cheapest, you're the lowest cost, you're the highest quality. The problem is that when the market moves on, so an example of that might be Kodak films, what happens is you are brilliant, the best in the world at making Kodak films and Kodak papers, but nobody buys film and nobody buys paper anymore. And for that reason, your business disappears, even though you were excellent at it. So it's not necessarily the case that being excellent at something guarantees your success. It has to be situational. Does the customer seek value, and do you deliver that value? All right, so firms have a choice. Competitive strategy, therefore, will include how complex is our organisation and how do we simplify it so that we can give customers what they want. And we have this idea of a specialised company, which is very good at one thing. It controls things and it produces unique, niche, high-quality products. That's okay, but they tend to be inflexible because by being specialised, you're good at one thing and not good at everything. And the alternative, therefore, is to have something which is more integrated. You're more flexible, and therefore you can adapt to changing circumstances. You may even be able to be creative beyond the normal capacity of the company. So let's think then about growth. How do we grow our business? Because clearly by doing the same thing, it's unlikely that our business will grow unless the industry itself is growing. Okay, in which case we're not improving our competitive position. All we're doing is maintaining our competitive position. And our competitors want faster growth, and therefore they will take that growth away from us. So we have four choices really. One of them is we can sell more things to the same business, to the same customers, or the same market, and it's called market penetration. Relatively low risk, but also relatively low return. The alternative is we can develop new companies, come up with new ideas, new solutions, new services, and from that we can develop these new products and services for our existing customers. And this is called product development. It also applies, of course, to businesses. Or we can think of what we have at the moment and maybe globalize it. So rather than just making it available in the UK or Europe, we might make it available in America, Australia, China, or the Middle East, and that's essentially taking it to new marketplaces. The obvious choice is, human beings are human beings, and therefore all over the world they'll want, water and drink and other things. There are some variations, but we should be able to take our products to almost any marketplace. That, of course, isn't actually true. And even if the product itself is satisfactory and nutritious, it doesn't mean that in particular countries that product will become successful, because there are incumbent competitors and they want to fight to defend their position and their shares. So it follows that just because you have a good product, you don't necessarily have a successful sales strategy. And then finally, there's diversification. And the concept of diversification is simply that, when you have talent inside your business, you can use that talent to come up with solutions that maybe previously weren't considered. And they may go to industries and marketplaces that you hadn't really thought about. An example of that might be companies that are very good at developing technology. So ARM is a UK-based chip designer and manufacturer. And what they do effectively is they're so good at designing IT chips that work very, very fast, very fast processors, that they effectively don't have to make them. They can design them and then sell the concept of their design to companies like mobile phone companies or IT companies that want to build faster, more responsive, high performance games, for example. And so they don't even bother with the manufacturing part. They just come up with great ideas. And essentially what they've taken their great ideas, which they used to manufacture, and now they just sell the ideas, and they go to all sorts of different industries. Okay, so there is that choice as well. So why do we diversify? Well, essentially because we want to grow, and diversification typically offers the fastest growth rate, but at the greatest risk and the greatest expense. The reason we want to diversify is we can spread our risk, because any industry goes through an introduction, growth, maturity, and decline stage. And if you're only in one industry, at some point you will decline. If you're in multiple industries, the likelihood is that some will be growing, some will be maturing, some will be declining. And if you get that balance right, on average, your corporation has a growth potential rather than a maturity or a decline potential. Okay, so Porter talked about how do you choose what to do, and the answer is, well, firstly, only go to attractive industries. Don't go into industries which are highly competitive or the margins are very small. Secondly, what's the cost of entering into those marketplaces? Because sometimes the cost of entering, Amazon is an interesting example of a company that has spent billions entering a marketplace in which they had to control the entire supply chain in order to deliver. That's a very unusual situation to be in, and it's very unlikely that many companies will be able to follow, because the cost of trying to copy them, given the fact that Amazon will always try to fight them off, means that they're likely ever to get money back. So being the first in that case was a great example of, first there gets the lion's share, because to follow them now will be almost impossible to try to reproduce it. It'll be far too expensive. The chance you ever get the high profits you're looking for are almost negligible, and therefore it's not an attractive idea to join that type of marketplace. And then there's the other one, which is the better off. As a consequence, will your corporation be better off if it diversifies, because it's spreading its risk, reducing its risk, or maybe increasing its social responsibility, which may become very important in the future, right? So essentially, that's what we've covered in that week. And I'm hopeful that you understand then that the business is the industry in which you're in, and how do we keep competing in that industry, as opposed to the corporation, which is which industry should we be in. And actually, like any good investor, you don't have to invest in what you know. It's sometimes a good idea to invest in things that you don't know but seem to be growing. Clearly, don't put all your money into one basket or put all your eggs in one basket, and as a consequence, there's a potential you might be successful. So one last thing that we're thinking about last week and this week is this idea of the corporation manages where do we compete, the business manages how do we compete. So you can imagine a corporation is surrounded by multiple businesses. Essentially, it's a bit like, the parents of a family being surrounded by all their children, and all their children will be saying, please invest in me. I need these new shoes more than my brother or my sister needs these new shoes, because if I have these new shoes, I will be able to make you proud. Now, if all the children are saying the same thing, the challenge then is, how does the parent, the corporation, manage their subsidiary or the children? And that's what we'll talk about a bit more this week. A couple of articles about that are loaded up onto My Aberdeen. Definitely worth reading, because this is the typical answer to what's the difference between a corporation and a business, and how do you manage that difficult relationship. Okay, hope you're still enjoying the course. Don't think I've lost any weight this week, but I'm still working on it. I've got a bit more of a tan, but again, I'm spending far too much time inside. Look forward to seeing you this week. More multiple choice tests. And what we'll cover this week is chapter 6, so that we can go back over one of those sections around innovation management and technology. And that'll be helpful for the case studies. Okay, look forward to meeting you all this week. Bye for now.